What would it take for you to walk away from something you knew was true? That's what we're going to talk about today in Hebrews chapter 2. Hi, everyone. This is Jill from the Northwoods talking about Bible one small chapter at a time. Chapter 1 gave us this 7-point portrait of the Son, radiant, eternal, universe-creating, sin-purifying, seated at the right hand of God the Father, and it's majestic. It's the most majestic thing on this planet. And chapter 2 does not pull back from that, but it does something kind of remarkable. It takes that same majestic view of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and brings him all the way down into humanity, flesh and blood, into temptation and suffering, and even death itself. And that moment, from the throne room to the manger to the cross to the throne room, it's the whole argument of this chapter at all. So when the chapter opens, it says a word like therefore. And whenever you hear that word therefore, it means because of everything we just talked about, because of the things I just said, this is the payoff. The Son of God is going to pay off right at this particular point. Pay attention to what I'm going to say next. He says that we have to pay a much closer attention to what we've heard so we don't drift away. We don't leave it. The word drifting is a nautical word. Imagine a ship that is supposed to be docked at the harbor and then slowly drifts away. That's what's happening, and that's what's happening to people. Nobody throws the anchor overboard and says, I'm leaving faith today. It's slower than that. It's neglect and distraction and looking at the rest of the world. And it's treating the gospel like background noise. It's not even a part of our lives anymore. It's just something that's happening, around us. The danger the author is describing isn't, like I said, I think of the big heresies or apostasies, but drift is something that is so small and it never announces itself. And then it just happens gradually when you stop paying attention, and then one day you wake up and you're far from shore. Verses 2 and 3 makes that argument that if the law is given through the angels at Sinai was binding, and it was, every violation has consequences. Sin is important. Then how much more important is it to neglect the salvation that was announced by the Lord himself? The logic is that these laws are lesser than the Son who delivered the gospel himself. It was important that the angels delivered the law, but the Son himself is more important. The salvation is more important. The stakes are higher now to fall away from the gospel. And then verse 4 adds this confirmation of this message that with signs and wonders and gifts of the Holy Spirit, not as a permanent system that we can demand today, but as a divine seal on the apostolic foundation. The message was certified, right? We know that the apostles were given the true message, the thing that they're supposed to understand and then carry out to spread the gospel throughout the entire world. I think that we think about God's testament as being his words alone about the things that Jesus said. But all the miracles and all the things that the apostles did is also testifying it as well. When we get later in now to Psalms, or verses 5 through 8, I let out there, we go to Psalms 8, which is a psalm about humanity's place in creation. It's a psalm about us. What is a man that you are mindful of him? You made him a little lower than the angels. You crowned him with glory and honor, and you put everything under his feet. The promise of what God has done for us, of our human dignity, that God has created us as ruling over creation, that we have dominion over it, glory over that. And then the verse 8b is just brutally honest. And then the second part of it says, at present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. When we look around, what do we see? When we look around, we see death ruling this world. That's what seems to have dominion now. Disease, war, problems. the brokenness of our own hearts. That's what we kind of look around us. But what Psalm 8 is saying is it's not fully realized yet. Sin has marred it. The dominion is postponed. The law is the clearest form. And this is exactly what it is, that the law is clear to us because we see what we're not doing correctly. Then verse 9 goes on, but, and there we get the big word, but we see him for a little while was made lower than the angels. Jesus was crowned with glory and honor, sitting at the right hand of God, but there was suffering to death. There was the life that Jesus had on this earth, letting Jesus taste death for everybody so that God's grace may rule, may win everything, so that all of us may be inheritance of all of that. And so we don't see that everything has been put align. We still see Jesus, though. And that's the most important sentence here. The failed dominion of what Adam was supposed to have, Jesus stepped in, made lower than the angels for a little while. That's the incarnation of Jesus into human flesh, humiliated on the cross, beaten, died, and now crowned with glory and honor. The man Jesus in his resurrection and his ascension did what Adam couldn't do. He repaired the damage that Adam started, all of us are participating in, and now has entered in glory as promised that he was supposed to. His death wasn't an example of courage. It was that he tasted death for everybody. That's that you'll hear in Christian churches what they call substitutionary language, that he took our place. We deserved all of that, and instead he drank the cup of death in our place so that by grace we get that crown that he earned. Okay, so then the author is developing something that's really moving after this place, because verse 10 says it was fitting, meaning it's appropriate. It was right to do, was consistent with who God is to make the pioneer of our salvation perfect through suffering. The pioneer word is an interesting word, because it means a trailblazer, a pathfinder, someone who finds their own way, hacks through the bushes and makes a path. Jesus went first into that death and through it blazed a path that now we follow so that we can also share in that eternal life. That is really remarkable because we have a place in this. He just was the first to go down that path and make a place for us, and now we're going to walk that same path. The author then quotes 3 Old Testament passages, Psalm 22, Isaiah 8, and shows Jesus basically speaking in them. So Psalm 22 shows Jesus speaking in them. Psalm 22 has Jesus saying, I will tell your name to my brothers. In Isaiah, it says, I will put my trust in him. And then, here I am, the children of God have given me. The incarnate, the Jesus in his flesh, being born, essentially, praying with us, walking with us, trusting the Father the whole time, and then standing here and calling us brothers and sisters. He called us. He said, who's my brothers and sisters? People who do the will of God. He's not ashamed to call all of us brothers and sisters. Even at the time, he is God himself. And so when you think about where it is that you're carrying things in life, he's not ashamed of you. He's not ashamed of your history and your failures and your doubt and your tiredness, your questions that you ask, the times that you're mad at him. He is not ashamed of you. That's the whole gospel right there. He calls you his. He ties himself to you. And so regardless of what you did or what you feel that you can't get past, he still calls you his. And then we get to this idea about why Jesus had to become flesh in the first place. I think that's a big question. I hear it still today. Why in the world would God become flesh? It doesn't even make sense. just stay in heaven and do heaven things. And why be like us? No God would do that, right? And so instead, it explains that these basically explaining the incarnation from 3 different angles. And the first one is to destroy the one who has power of death. The children share in the flesh and blood, and he likens himself, to those same things, that through this death, that he may destroy the one who has power of death, which is the devil, once and for all. We cannot defeat the devil. The devil cannot be defeated from outside. He had to enter life, and taking on flesh and blood, and then dying and rising, he broke the devil's hold, not by power alone, but by going through the death process itself and coming out the other side as the firstborn from the dead. They might say, well, Joe, there were other people who were raised from the dead. We saw them in the Gospels. But Jesus was the first one who went to the resurrected body. When Lazarus came out of the tomb, he still stinketh. He was in his old body. So whatever, if he had a limp, if he had a scar, he still had them. Jesus came out the resurrected body. And when we look at that, that's the most important thing, is that he went through this first so we can follow his path. Second, he basically is freeing everybody who has a lifelong slavery by the fear of death. When we think of this as, I guess, like pastoral psychology, the fear of death isn't just about dying. It shapes how we are. We're afraid to die. Many people are very, very afraid to die. It makes us avoid risk. It makes us exercise. It makes us cling to comfort and hedge our bets and live small because we're afraid of what's going to happen. And Jesus' victory over death means that we're free from that slavery. We can live boldly. Jesus said that people were going to be put to death because of his words, because death isn't real anymore. We do it, but we're going to come out the other side. Death has been defeated. And then the third answer to this is that in mercy and faithful high priest, the priestly theme here is now going to be introduced. We're going to talk more about this as we go through Hebrews. It's going to run all the way, I think, through chapter 10. But he is made like his brothers in every respect so that he could be merciful, a merciful high priest. He didn't just watch us suffer from a safe distance. He was tempted, he suffered, and because of that, he's able to help all of us who are also being tempted. This word help is an image of someone who's running out there to give aid. I think of the first thought I had was like a medic. I'm going to run out there and help you. When you're tempted, when you're suffering, it's not the end of you. He runs out to help. And not reluctantly, he is doing it so that he can help you most directly, right there where you're at, where you're lying in the street injured, right? Metaphorically. And he understands because he knows exactly what that costs, because he went through that process as well. That's really what Jesus is going through this whole piece. So you see, and I thought the interesting thing was a merciful high priest. I think that at times we've seen some high priests, right? We saw Caiaphas and Ananias, and we saw these high priests, and they weren't merciful. They weren't kind to the people. They weren't helping their people. But Jesus, he's the high priest that does. He's the high priest who runs out and helps everybody. And that makes him in stark contrast to what was going on in the temple structure itself. This chapter, then closes with this warning against drifting. And so that ends chapter 2. And, we are moved from the warning against this drift. We get that. We have a high priest who wants to help us. He's glorious, but he's also human. He's enthroned on the great throne, but he's sympathetic to what we're going through because he went through to it too. He is both a pioneer who went ahead of us, but also someone who stands with us and helps us right there, in the midst of all of this. The author really in chapter 3 is going to make this sort of startling comparison about Jesus versus Moses and the greatest figure of the old covenant versus Jesus of the now and acting covenant. And this argument is going to be careful and very profound. What I'm going to meditate on this week is that he is not ashamed to call us brothers. I keep coming back to that because the one who upholds the entire universe, I mean, think about that. The entire universe created, runs, operates, upheld by him, is not ashamed to call us his brothers and sisters. He doesn't do this reluctantly or like, well, guess I have to call Jill's sister because, well, look at what she did. But instead, he's there despite everything. He's not ashamed of us. And he wants us to know that. And that's something I'm just, like I said, I'm going to have to think a lot about that. And what I'm going to pray about is the idea that when I have fear, whether it's of death or some decision I'm going to make, or, the decisions I'm making in my own life or what path I'm going, the author of Hebrew tells us that Jesus became flesh specifically to free people who are held in lifelong slavery by fear. I don't want to live an enslaved life. I don't like being afraid. And he already defeated everything. The Lord's victory is real and it's practical and it's a daily detail in our own lives. And we need to live like that's true. And what I'm going to share with others is that Jesus just didn't observe the suffering in our lives at a distance. He entered into this life, tempted, suffered, beaten. He was betrayed by people. It cost him his life. He knows what this whole humanity experience is like because he was there. And so if you're just feeling like you're at the end of yourself, he is not just going to send you help. He is the help, and he is running to help you. That is not a small thing. And if you need to share that with someone, it's something certainly worth telling them. All right, everyone, thanks so much. I appreciate you being out there. And you can find all my podcasts at jillfromthenorthwoods.com. It has everything I do. And you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I'd love to hear from you. And you can put a comment right here, too. Thanks so much, and have a great day.